Okay, we're going to try a reread of chapter 2. Let's hope that it works this time. From the time we docked, I was swept on by a wave of excitement, which carried me through such arrival ceremonies as being deloused and having my papers okayed. The formalities completed, an immigration officer put me on the train for Holyoke, Massachusetts, explaining in Yiddish that I must sit still. He could have saved his breath. Of course, I would sit still. I was too scared to move a muscle. The train was bigger and noisier than I had seen in Russia, and when an American lady, nothing like the statue, took the seat beside me, I could not help staring at her strange clothing. After a while, it dawned on me that maybe I was the one who was dressed peculiarly, and I tried to push my potato sack out of sight. The lady smiled and spoke to me, but I could only shake my head dumbly. All during the trip, I listened to the voices around me, trying to sort out what they were saying. Excitement sustained me till I was in the depot at Holyoke. Standing by the ticket window, I watched as other passengers were greeted and hugged and kissed. Then the train puffed away, and I, left alone with my potato sack, discovered that I was tired and hungry and homesick, although I kept reminding myself that it was not just a dream. I was really in America, and all my friends in Yano would give their eye teeth to be in my shoes. My attempt at a pep talk was not very successful. All I wanted to do was cry. The station master came over and looked at the identification tag to my coat. Speaking to me in German, which I could understand a little, he said not to be frightened. I would be sure to be met, and he gave me a piece of candy, feeling a little better. I settled down, but my morale was completely shattered when it grew dark and the big electric signs flashed on. I had never seen anything like them. I was petrified. At long last, the Grodeskis, the people with whom I was to stay, came bustling up to claim me. After making sure I was all in one piece, Mr. Grodeski slung my potato sack over his shoulder and motioned to Mrs. Grodeski for us to follow him. I remember looking back and smiling at the station master, who waved by. The Grodeskis had come to America 5 years before, and though not acquainted with my family, were friends of friends. Father had arranged to send them a sum monthly in advance for my keep and schooling, but I arrived in mid-December. It was too late to enroll me for the current term, so Mrs. Grodeski suggested that for the time being I helped her with the housework, explaining that Nadia, the eldest of the numerous children, was preparing for college and was not much use around the house. My relation with the Grodeskis was a curious one. I was fed and clothed and taken care of. No one struck me, spoke to me harshly. No one was unkind. Instead, their attitude toward me was one of complete indifference. All my life, I had been an affectionate child, demonstrative and outgoing. Now, during the unresponsive Grodeskis, I had to learn to live within myself. My first friends in America were the McDonald sisters who lived next door. They invited me to join their games, told me the English words for things, and never made fun of me. After I started school, I found another friend and teacher, Mrs. O'Sullivan, who was kind and patient and took extra time to help me catch on to American ways. But perhaps the most valuable thing she taught me was to take a joke. Thanks to Mrs. O'Sullivan, when the other kids laughed at the slips I made, I could laugh with them. Being a woman of heart, she understood that for people who have had little opportunity to acquire the social graces, laughter sometimes can be the saving one. I worked hard in school, but when the term ended, I came home brandishing a report card glittering with A's. Mrs. Grodeski signed it without comment. Pats on the head were not included with room and board. However, as consolation, there was a letter from father saying the family soon would be sailing for America. That was in June of 1914. A few weeks later, the First World War was in full swing, and this effectually scuttled my family's travel plans. Moreover, it meant money no longer could be sent out of Russia, and Mr. Godesky ruled that I could not go back to school. Since I was only 5 months away from a diploma, I pleaded with him to allow me to finish, and in the end he relented enough to allow me to attend summer school. But there was a condition. If I was only 14, I must ask my father to send me a notary certificate that I was 16. Since I could not pay for my keep, I must go to work, and in the Golden Land you must have to be 16 to get a job. The day after the necessary papers arrived, I went to work in a paper factory. The wages were $3 a week, and I worked there 2 years. There is not much to remember about those years. I joined a library and spent my free time reading and writing to my family. I heard that my only sister Slava had died of malnutrition, and that the Germans had taken our horse, Gaba, and our cow and killed our chickens. But happenings in far off Russia were unreal to me, and gradually the passing of time took from me the thought of being with my family. How I was to go about it, I had no idea, but I knew that I must make a life for myself. I hated the confinement, the humdrum routine, the narrowness of life in the Godesky house. America was a whole big country, not just one town called Holyoke. Why shouldn't I see some of it? Was I to spend all my days like a mole, hidden away from the sun, buried behind the dark walls of a factory? Father had written that I had a cousin living in Brooklyn, New York, and one night at dinner, as I looked around the stolidly chewing Grodeskis, I decided to toss a bombshell. "I'm going to New York," I blurted, and waited tensely for their reaction. "Pass the mustard, Nadia," said Mr. Godesky.